guitar I've ever played. It's just got a good sound. One person can't change the world, but one person carrying a message can change the world.
Willie Nelson is a man who seems to have lived more than one lifetime. At 91, he's outlasted scandal, heartbreak, and nearly every obstacle a man could face. He survived financial ruin, narcotics busts, betrayals, and even the blacklisting of an industry that once turned its back on him. And through it all, he's become one of the most beloved and respected figures in country music. His story isn't just about fame, it's about survival, reinvention, and the cost of staying true to yourself. But when Willie looks back on all the people who shaped his life, one name always rises above the rest: Kris Kristofferson. For decades, there have been whispers about the complicated relationship between Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson. Some say they were rivals, others call them brothers. People have speculated about jealousy, betrayal, and quiet competition that ran beneath their public friendship. They were both part of the same outlaw movement, both rebels who rewrote the rules of country music. Yet there were moments when they seemed to drift apart, leaving fans to wonder what was really going on behind the scenes. To understand that bond, the push and pull between two of country's greatest minds, you first have to go back to where it all began. By the late 1960s, Nashville was a city built on control. The country music industry operated like a well-oiled machine, dictating how every artist should sound, dress, and even behave. It was a system run by executives and radio men who decided what counted as real country. Artists were expected to look clean-cut, sing about heartbreak and hometowns, and never stray too far from the formula. The Grand Ole Opry was the holy gatekeeper, and anyone who dared to challenge its authority was quickly silenced. Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson wanted none of that. For Willie, the road to success had already been long and unforgiving. He arrived in Nashville in the late 1950s with big dreams of being a performer, only to find himself stuck behind the scenes writing songs for other people. He penned timeless classics like Crazy for Patsy Cline and Hello Walls for Farron Young, songs that would go on to define the golden age of country music. But when it came to his own career, Nashville didn't know what to do with him. His voice was too raw, his phrasing too unorthodox, his lyrics too personal. He didn't fit the image executives were selling. Willie was neither the polished showman like Hank Snow nor the pretty boy crooner the industry wanted as its poster child. Kris Kristofferson's story was no less unconventional. He was the kind of man Nashville didn't know how to categorize. A war hero and Rhodes Scholar, he could have lived an easy life in the military or academia. Instead, he traded prestige for poverty, sweeping floors at Columbia Studios just to stay close to the music. His songs were poetic and haunting, filled with war, regret, loneliness, and philosophical reflections that most country radio stations wanted nothing to do with. He wasn't writing catchy bar tunes, he was writing literature, and that terrified Nashville. While the rest of country music sang about beer, cheating, and small towns, Kristofferson wrote about guilt, faith, and the ache of being human. His work was too introspective for the radio, too raw for the image Nashville wanted to maintain. But like Willie, he refused to change. They were two misfits walking parallel roads, both too talented and too stubborn to fit the mold. Then, in 1970, Kris Kristofferson pulled off one of the most legendary stunts in music history. Desperate to get Johnny Cash's attention, he borrowed a National Guard helicopter and landed it on Cash's lawn just to hand him a demo of Sunday Morning Coming Down. That bold act changed his life forever. Cash was moved by the song's brutal honesty and performed it live on his TV show. The performance resonated deeply across America, especially among working-class people who saw themselves in its weary truth. Overnight, Kristofferson became a star. The same industry that had once dismissed him now wanted a piece of him. Meanwhile, Willie Nelson was stuck in a creative prison. His label, RCA, kept forcing him into a box that didn't fit. They dressed him in suits, combed his hair, and layered his songs with polished orchestral arrangements meant to make him sound radio-friendly. But the more they tried to package him, the more they buried his soul. His albums flopped, and the industry quietly labeled him a failure. Despite writing some of the greatest songs of his generation, he couldn't sell his own voice. By the early 1970s, Willie was ready to quit music altogether. That's when Kris Kristofferson stepped in. Now famous, Kris saw in Willie what Nashville refused to see: pure, unfiltered genius. He told Willie to leave Nashville and head back to Texas, where a new kind of movement was beginning to stir. In Austin and Luckenbach, a different sound was taking shape. Bars were filling with bikers, cowboys, and hippies who didn't care about Nashville's rules. They wanted something real, music that reflected life as it was, not as it was packaged on the radio. Kris knew Willie belonged there. It turned out to be the best advice anyone had ever given him. Willie packed his bags and returned to Texas. There, in the smoky bars and open fields of Austin, he found the freedom he had been searching for. He let his hair and beard grow wild, tossed the suits, and started performing the way he wanted to. The crowds loved him. They didn't care about his rough voice or unconventional style. They cared about his authenticity. For the first time, Willie Nelson was accepted for who he was. Texas gave him something Nashville never could: liberation. It was there that Willie reinvented himself, not as a struggling songwriter.
Hello there. It's been a long time.
But as a revolutionary artist leading a movement that would change the future of country music. The Outlaw Country era had begun, and both Willie and Kris were at the heart of it. They weren't just musicians anymore. They were outlaws, men who challenged authority and won. But behind the scenes, there was another story brewing, one of quiet tension and unspoken rivalry. People close to them whispered that Willie sometimes felt overshadowed by Kris. For years, Kris had been the golden boy of country music, intelligent, charismatic, and effortlessly successful. He had what critics called literary depth and what Nashville liked to market as credibility. Willie, on the other hand, had fought tooth and nail just to be seen. While Kris was winning Grammys and landing major acting roles, Willie was still trying to convince record executives that he deserved to be taken seriously as a performer. Nashville loved Kris's poetic image, but it still saw Willie as a songwriter who worked best behind the curtain. That had to sting. By the mid-1970s, Kris Kristofferson's career was on fire. He wasn't just dominating country charts, he was crossing over into Hollywood, starring alongside Barbra Streisand in the 1976 blockbuster A Star Is Born. His image was everywhere: album covers, magazine spreads, movie posters. He was country music's intellectual superstar, the rare artist who could balance commercial success with artistic credibility. Willie, watching all this unfold, had to wonder when it would be his turn, and then, finally, it came. In 1973, tired of waiting for Nashville's approval, Willie took full control of his career. He returned to his Texas roots and poured his frustration into an album called Shotgun Willie. It was the sound of a man breaking free. He abandoned the polished studio gloss and replaced it with gritty, soulful honesty. The album marked a rebirth. Willie was no longer the quiet songwriter behind the scenes. He was front and center, unapologetically himself. From that moment on, Willie Nelson wasn't just another country artist. He was a movement all by himself. His long hair, laid-back persona, and poetic songs became symbols of rebellion. Fans connected to him on a spiritual level. They saw him as one of them, imperfect, honest, and free. As the years went on, the balance between him and Kris shifted. By the late 1970s, Willie Nelson had become one of the biggest names in country music. He was selling out stadiums, releasing platinum albums, and leading the outlaw country movement alongside legends like Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard. Nashville, which once rejected him, was now chasing him. The outsider had become the king. Some insiders say Kris struggled with that. It wasn't pure jealousy. It was more like the uneasy realization that the student had surpassed the teacher. The industry that once celebrated Kris as its intellectual rebel now worshipped Willie as its new prophet. As Willie's fame exploded, Kris's career began to slow down. His albums didn't sell the way they used to, and his acting roles grew less predictable. The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was clear. Willie had become the face of outlaw country, and Kris was now the supporting figure. Still, the two remained deeply connected. Despite any quiet tension, they shared an unbreakable bond, one built on mutual respect and the shared understanding of what it meant to fight the system. They wrote songs together, performed side by side, and stood shoulder to shoulder as outlaws who rewrote country music's DNA. In the end, their story isn't one of rivalry, it's one of evolution. Kris Kristofferson helped Willie Nelson rediscover his identity, and Willie helped turn that rebellious spirit into a movement that changed American music forever. They challenged Nashville's authority, tore down its walls, and gave a voice to every artist who refused to be tamed. Now, at 91, Willie Nelson looks back at those years not with bitterness, but with gratitude. He knows that without Kris Kristofferson's courage, vision, and friendship, the world might never have met the true Willie Nelson, the outlaw, the poet, the survivor. And in that reflection lies the truth.
That one, so I figure anything else. If you get through that, you can get through anything.
You were always on my mind.
Theirs wasn't a feud. It was a lifelong duet between two men who dared to play their own tune, even when the rest of the world told them not to. His personal demons, alcoholism, failed relationships, and a growing reputation for being difficult to work with were finally catching up with him. But beneath all the career tension and crumbling fame, the most painful strain between the two outlaw legends wasn't about music or money. It was about a woman who became the center of a quiet storm that nearly tore their friendship apart. Few people outside the industry truly knew this, but both Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson were linked to the same woman, Rita Coolidge. Rita was more than just a pretty face in the crowd of country and rock's golden age. She was a voice that could hush a room, a presence that could draw in anyone within her orbit. She wasn't simply famous for her beauty, but for the warmth and charisma that followed her everywhere she went. A gifted singer and songwriter, she had collaborated with legends like Eric Clapton, Leon Russell, and Joe Cocker. To many, she represented the soul of 1970s rock and country crossover, a woman who could move effortlessly between genres, leaving behind a trail of unforgettable songs and broken hearts. Among those hearts were two of country music's most iconic outlaws, Kris Kristofferson, the poetic songwriter with a wild streak, and Willie Nelson, the gentle rebel who turned defiance into art. In 1973, Rita married Kris, and from the outside, they looked like the perfect couple. Two beautiful, talented souls who had found each other in the chaos of fame. But behind the charm and chemistry, there was fire, passionate, consuming, and destructive. Their relationship was one of extremes, swinging between deep love and explosive conflict. Kris was a man of many contradictions, brilliant but tortured, affectionate but jealous, confident yet insecure. His drinking often fueled the darker sides of his personality, and Rita later admitted that living with him was like being on a roller coaster with no brakes. He loved fiercely, but also fought just as fiercely. Their marriage was filled with love letters and arguments, long nights of songwriting followed by even longer nights of silence. But the story didn't begin there. Before Rita became Mrs. Kristofferson, there were whispers, rumors that she and Willie Nelson had shared something special, something real. Neither of them ever confirmed it, and perhaps that's what kept it alive in the shadows. Industry insiders would talk in quiet corners about their rumored brief romance. Whether it was love, a spark of connection, or simply a fleeting moment of understanding between two kindred spirits, no one could say for sure. What was certain, though, was that Kris knew about the whispers, and that they bothered him. Given Kris's reputation for jealousy and possessiveness, it wasn't hard to imagine that these rumors could have created a silent tension between him and Willie. They were friends, brothers in music, partners in the outlaw movement that was reshaping country music forever. But friendship becomes fragile when love enters the picture. Whenever Rita was around, some claimed that an invisible wall existed between the two men, a mixture of mutual respect and unspoken discomfort. Still, they never let it explode publicly. Whatever they felt, they buried it under their shared passion for music. Eventually, the storm that had brewed inside Kris and Rita's marriage became too powerful to contain. The love that had once burned so brightly began to consume them from within. In 1980, after 7 years of turbulence, passion, and pain, they divorced. For Rita, it was both an ending and a release. She later reflected on Kris with a bittersweet mix of love and sorrow, admitting that he had a beautiful heart but was haunted by demons that made peace impossible. For Kris, losing her was one of his life's deepest regrets. He confessed in later interviews that he never truly stopped loving her, even long after they went their separate ways. Meanwhile, Willie Nelson's life took a different path. As Kris struggled with heartbreak and declining fame, Willie was ascending into superstardom. He had become the face of the outlaw movement, the laid-back rebel with braids, a joint in his hand, and a guitar that spoke for every misfit in America. But success didn't mean serenity. His rise to the top came with its own set of storms, financial chaos, legal troubles, and a tangled web of relationships that could rival any country song. While Kris's struggles were mostly internal, driven by self-doubt, alcohol, and the heavy toll of his Hollywood ventures, Willie's battles were external. He wasn't a man at war with himself, but a man betrayed by those around him. Willie trusted people easily, maybe too easily, especially when it came to money. His financial managers made reckless investments and bad decisions in his name, leading to one of the most infamous tax scandals in music history. By the late 1980s, the IRS claimed that Willie owed a staggering $16.7 million in unpaid taxes, one of the largest debts ever recorded against a musician. Almost overnight, the government seized his ranch, recording studios, properties, and even his guitars. The man who had sung about freedom and wide-open roads now faced total financial ruin. But Willie Nelson was not a man who gave up easily. Instead of surrendering, he did something no one expected. He turned his debt into music. In 1992, he released a stripped-down acoustic album titled The IRS Tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories. The concept was simple but brilliant. Every dollar earned from the album's sales would go directly toward paying off his tax debt. He even agreed to promote it through a late-night infomercial, turning his crisis into one of the most unusual comebacks in music history. Fans from across the country rallied behind him, buying copies as a show of support. Slowly, dollar by dollar, he began to rebuild his life. But while his career was rebounding, his personal life remained as chaotic as ever. Willie had always been honest about his approach to love. He believed in it deeply, but he never believed in its boundaries. He once joked that monogamy just wasn't in his nature, and his life proved it time and again. He married multiple times, had numerous affairs, and fathered several children outside of marriage. For Willie, love was something to be experienced, not confined. One of the most famous stories from his love life came from his second wife, Shirley Colley. One afternoon, she opened the mail and found a hospital bill. It was for the birth of a baby she hadn't given birth to. Confused and heartbroken, she confronted Willie. That was when he confessed that the child was his daughter, born from an affair with a woman named Connie Kupka. That moment marked the end of his marriage to Shirley and the beginning of a new chapter, one just as complicated as the last. Even after marrying Connie, Willie's wandering heart didn't settle. He continued to have affairs, and eventually, that marriage too crumbled under the weight of infidelity. Yet through it all, Willie never tried to hide who he was. He owned his flaws with the same honesty that made his songs so relatable. When asked about his marriages, he simply said, "I wasn't always the best husband. Let's just say I had a hard time saying no." Beyond his romantic escapades, Willie's reputation as an outlaw wasn't just for show. His lifelong love for marijuana repeatedly landed him in trouble with the law. From Texas in 1974 to Louisiana in 1994, and even North Carolina in 2010, he was arrested multiple times for possession. Each time, the authorities made a spectacle of it, as if arresting Willie Nelson would somehow send a message about the war on drugs. But Willie remained unbothered. Instead of hiding, he leaned into it, becoming one of the most outspoken advocates for marijuana legalization in the world. While Willie faced his troubles with humor and defiance, Kris battled his with quiet suffering.
I feel like, I'm another singer, another guitar player. I know there's a lot better guitar players and a lot better singers.
Alcohol had become both his companion and his curse. The same intensity that made him a brilliant songwriter also made him self-destructive. Hollywood had chewed him up and spit him out, and as he grew older, he began to retreat from the spotlight, focusing more on reflection than fame. Despite everything, the rumors, the rivalry, the heartbreak, Kris and Willie's bond never truly broke. They had shared too much history, too much music, and too much pain to ever walk away completely. They came from the same dirt roads and honky-tonks, from the same spirit of rebellion that defined an entire generation of artists. In the years that followed, both men softened with age. The wild outlaws who once defied the rules of Nashville became elder statesmen of American music. They played together again, laughed about old times, and sang the songs that once defined their youth. When Willie looked back on his life, he often spoke of Kris not as a rival, but as a brother, a man who had changed him in ways few others could. Today, Willie Nelson continues to tour, his voice weathered but still unmistakable, while Kris Kristofferson has stepped away from the stage, content to live quietly after decades in the public eye. Their story isn't just about fame or scandal, it's about two men who lived on their own terms, who made mistakes, broke hearts, and wrote songs that told the truth about being human. The whispers about Rita Coolidge may have faded, and the wounds from old rivalries may have healed, but their friendship endured. Together, they helped redefine what country music could be, not polished, not perfect, but raw, real, and fearless. Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson didn't just sing about life, they lived every messy, beautiful, painful part of it. And though their paths were often tangled with heartbreak, controversy, and redemption, their bond remains a testament to what true artistry and friendship can survive. They changed country music forever, leaving behind a legacy that will outlive every rumor, every scandal, and every song.